On this episode of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast.
I have a passion for this kind of entertainment, and I have since I was 10 years old, which is when I was first exposed to it. When I was 10, I went to a circus with my family. It's called the Clyde Cole Brothers Circus. They had a sideshow there, and I got chosen out of the crowd to pull the sword from a sword swallower, and I was like, that's for me.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. Hey there, and welcome to episode number 101 of Jeff Does Vegas. Before we get into this episode of the show, I want to take a moment to thank everyone for checking out the last episode of the podcast, celebrating the milestone of hitting 100 episodes. We took a trip down memory lane, resharing highlights from some of my more recent episodes, including conversations with Jonathan Jossel of The Plaza, Sam Novak from Vegas Unfiltered, Matthew O'Brien with The Tunnels of Las Vegas, and much more. If you haven't listened as of yet, jump into the archives at jeffdoesvegas.com or search out episode number 100, Another Damn Clip Show, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, enough of that, on to the show. My guest for this episode of the podcast is a somewhat unique Las Vegas performer. John Shaw is a magician, illusionist, and sideshow stunt artist. He spits fire, he swallows swords, he eats light bulbs, he dangles paint cans from hooks attached to his eyelids, and this is just a sampling of his repertoire. Over the years, John has appeared on numerous TV talk shows, including The Howard Stern Show, The Tonight Show, and The Late Late Show with James Corden. He's toured as part of Masters of Illusion and The Illusionists. Currently, John appears regularly at Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, where he shares his knowledge of the paranormal and the occult with visitors, as well as freaking them out by performing his various stunts. And for the last year, he's been working as part of a show called Late Night Magic, which runs every Friday and Saturday night at the Alexis Park All-Suite Resort, Las Vegas. John and I talked about the weird, crazy road that brought him to Las Vegas initially, all of his past TV appearances and the lessons he learned from them, what got him interested in magic and sideshow performances in the first place, and some of the various injuries he sustained as part of those performances. Please enjoy my conversation with John Shaw.
I'm originally from New York. I grew up in New York, and I moved to Las Vegas when I was 23 years old. And that would have been back in 1995. And I came out here like a lot. Well, at the time, I was with a lady, and she was like, "Hey, we'd been dating for a little bit, and we were getting serious." And she was like, "I really don't want to live in New York anymore. I want to live anywhere else. I just don't want to live in New York." And I'm like, "All right." She's like, "Pick anywhere you want to go." And I'm like, "What about Las Vegas? Because magic." So she was like, "Okay, well, let's go." I had a friend out here. And she was like, "Yeah, you can stay with me. Come out. You can use my car. I'll drive you around. We'll go do some fun stuff." She was a stripper. So she worked in nighttime so we could go out during the day and do stuff. And at night we could, and then I just would go pick her up when she was done, doing her thing. And so it was kind of cool. And she was a local. She was born and raised in Las Vegas. So she knew like all the stuff. Vegas in 95, considerably different than it is now.
Right.
It was right at the tail end of 94, I should say, because I moved here in 95. So I came out in the end of 94. While we were out here, I got married to said lady. Needless to say, that didn't work out, but that's beside the point. But we moved, we picked up all of our stuff, and I literally packed an entire truck with everything I had in life. And I came out here, and I didn't have a job. Only thing we did, we came out here, and this is before the internet too. So there was like no online stuff you could do with renting apartments or anything. We came out here, we looked around at a bunch of apartments in an area of town that she said was good. And then we found an apartment. I remember my first 2-bedroom apartment was on Tropicana, West Tropicana and Lindell Road. I still remember the cross streets. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment, upstairs floor, vaulted ceilings. It had a fireplace. It was great, actually. And it was $750 a month. I remember the price. You couldn't get that same apartment for $750 now. But back in the day, that's what it was. So we moved here. I didn't have anything. I knew one person, and I came out here, and I knew there was a magic club here in town that met every Wednesday. And I was like, literally week 1, went to the magic club and started making friends. And that's how I started. My first magic friend out here was a gentleman named Kevin James, who is a very well-known magician and invented a lot of amazing magic tricks, some of which I use in my show. David Copperfield uses, like, all kinds of stuff. And he was actually, when I got married, he was the best man at my wedding because he was the only male that I knew out here. So I was like, hey, man, I know we just don't really know each other that well, but would you be the best man at my wedding? So, we did that, and it was kind of a spare of the moment. I got married by Elvis, of course.
Of course.
Because, yeah, I was like, I knew it probably wouldn't last, but at least I would have a fun memory of being married by Elvis. At least that was a good memory. But we were like, she was like 21 and I was 23, and, we just didn't really think much about it. We just fucking did it. And it seemed like a great idea at the time, but whatever. And then, I came out here, no job, no promises of any jobs. And I was like, okay, well, I got to go find something to do. My very first job in Las Vegas, not entertainment related at all, was being a bodyguard for the Grateful Dead when they were playing a big show out here. That was my very first job. I got hired on as a security guy for this security company, and they did all kinds of big events. And I got hired. They looked at me and they're like, "Whoa, you look scary. So we'll stick you with the band." So I wound up bodyguarding Jerry Garcia for 4 days while they played the Silver Bowl out here. And they even, one of the first things they asked me, like, "Are you a fan of the Grateful Dead?" I was like, "No, I hate their music." They're like, "Perfect, then you're going to bodyguard the band." So that was my first gig. And then I started working for a company called Little Darlings, which is run by Deja Vu, which is a strip club. Mm-hmm. And so I worked as a doorman, and then they realized I wasn't stupid, and that I could be very useful. And so they made me a floor manager because I was good at making sure everybody did what they were supposed to do. And I was very efficient. So then I did that for a while, and then I got my first break. And I met a guy at the strip club who was a friend of one of the managers, who was a singer, like a lounge singer in town. And he was friends with Debbie Reynolds. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if people know who Debbie Reynolds is. Debbie Reynolds was a really big star back in the day with like Sinatra and everything. And she's the mother of Carrie Fisher, which is Princess Leia. So Debbie Reynolds had her own casino out here called the Debbie Reynolds Hotel and Casino. Down on Convention Center Drive, if I remember correctly, between Paradise and the Las Vegas Boulevard. And she had a big show at night. Then she had an after hours show. And this guy was like, when he met me at the strip club, he was like, this isn't your like goal, right? To be a strip club manager. I was like, no, he's like, what do you do? I was like, I'm a magician. He's like, really? He's like, you do magic? So I'm like, yeah. So I talked to him for, a couple of weeks, and he was like, well, I'm friends with Debbie Reynolds. Do you have a videotape I can give her to see your act? And maybe I can get you a spot. There's no money, but I'll get you a spot. I'm like, don't give a shit. So I went and was like, oh shit, I got to go get a videotape made, because I didn't have a promo tape. I had nothing. So I found a local guy who had a studio here in Vegas. I went. I think it cost me $125, and he shot and edited the video and made me copies and everything. And I went and gave it to the guy, and he was like, "Yep, Debbie Reynolds wants you." Gave me the date. I asked for that date off from the strip club. They refused me, and I was like, "Well, I got it. I got to take that. I got to do this." And he's like, "Well, you got to work. I don't have anybody to cover you." And I'm like, well, then I quit. And he's like, you're going to quit for this? And I'm like, yeah, because I don't care about this. And so I quit. And I had no job after that. But I didn't care because that to me was worth doing because it was important to me. And that was my passion, and not, being around, 200 naked girls who are annoying as shit most of the time. But so I did that, and she was really, she loved me. It was like her. Rip Taylor was also there. And I was just like, as a kid, I remember seeing them, and my mom and all them loved all that stuff. So I was always exposed to that as a child. And then I was like, man, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do this. And they all came to me after the show, and they were like, you got something. You should really work at this. You should do this. And I was like, thank you. So that was my first little shot. And there was a couple people there who were like, hey, there's some shows at the Excalibur. They have this free stage upstairs on the second level by the buffet, and they have acts all day long, variety acts all day long, magicians and jugglers and all kinds of different stuff. And they're like, you should go there. And I was like, okay. So I went over there, and I watched shows all day long, every day, because I had no job now. So I would just go and watch shows all day, every day. And I started to befriend some of the performers. And I was like, hey, who do you talk to about auditioning to perform here? Now, I didn't ask the magicians because obviously they would think I'm coming for their job, which you are. So I talked to the contortionists and the jugglers, and they were like, oh, you got to meet with this guy named Mike Hartzell. I was like, okay, how do I do that? And they were like, oh, well, here's the phone number. Blah, blah, blah. So then I made friends, and then I got the information that I needed. Got my little promo kit, made an appointment to go meet him. Went upstairs to his office. Of course, he wasn't available. So I left it with his secretary. And then I proceeded to call that man every week for like 3 months until finally he called me back and told me to stop calling him, that he had watched the tape, and that the next audition was in June. And I was like, okay. He's like, so call me. He gave me the week. I don't remember what it was now, but it was this second or third week in June. He's like, we're going to hold auditions. I'm like, great. He's like, call me then, set up the time, and we'll get you to. So like clockwork, boom, set it up, did the audition, killed it, and I got the job. And that was my first professional job. I was doing 3 shows a day, 6 days a week on this stage. And I was making $650 a week to do that, which back in 1995, 96 wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And then one of the cool things is then they had extra things you could do to make more money. So I would host slot tournaments and all kinds of any kind of goofy thing that the hotel had. I would have to dress up in costumes, in medieval costumes, and then do all this stuff. So I was the slut of that whole thing, because anytime stuff came up, because I don't mind talking on the microphone, and I don't mind talking to people I do not know. And I'll talk to anybody about anything. I don't care. So I would host these giant slot tournaments. I get everybody riled up and like, come on, hit those feeder buttons like a rats that you are, and all that kind of stuff. And, and they loved me, and I would wear dumb hats, and I would just do stupid shit, and they loved it. They just absolutely loved it. And then I got offered a position in the King Arthur's tournament show. Mm-hmm. The first gig that I got with them was it was called the Huzzah. So at the beginning of the show, right before the show started, 15 minutes before the main show started, me and another individual would go out into the arena. And for those of you guys who haven't been to this show, it's a giant oval, and it's all dirt, and they do jousting and sword fighting. It's like medieval times. Mm-hmm. Very similar concept, pretty much the exact same thing, except way more choreographed, with like cool pyro and like it's Vegas, right? Right. So it's a dinner show. So we would get people riled up, and then we'd announce like birthdays, like this person sitting in Lord Kensington's section is having a birthday, and then we like sometimes people were going to get married, and I would do I set up a special thing with a magic trick, and where the guy could produce the ring for the girl and then propose. So we would do stuff like that. And I just, I hoard myself out. Like I would do it. I just did everything I get my hands on. I did it and never said, my one big thing, and I always told this a lot of performers, never say no. Mm-hmm. Pretty much never say no, especially when you're starting out. Take everything, because everything, even if it sucks, even if the pay is not great, that learning experience and that time doing that particular thing is going to be valuable down the line for you by a long shot. And then you can turn down those things because you've already gotten that experience. You don't need it anymore. And then I wound up getting into the show for a little bit as well, playing the bad guy. And because I had a beard and I really, really long hair at the time, my hair went down to like my waist. And I was the only guy allowed to have a beard in the show because the gentleman who created and ran the show did not like bearded men or men with hair anywhere on their bodies. And was like, only ugly people have facial hair. But he was like, for you, it's fine because you're the bad guy, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
So that was the deal. It was one of those life lessons where you just look at somebody like, wow, you just like shaven, smooth muscle boys. And he's like, yes, I do. And all of them had giant cod pieces. It was fantastic. The show is much different now, but back in the day, it was a thing to be seen. The girls very covered up. Boys, basically completely
not so
naked.
much.
Yeah, it's great. I did not do that. Yeah, no, not for me. But yeah. So then I did that for like 2 years, and then I left there because I needed to. My artistic side of me needed to grow, and I could not grow there. Mm. They wanted a specific kind of thing, and when I tried to do more artistic magic and cooler magic and stuff, they got mad at me about. So I was doing a trick with a cigarette. And I do not smoke. I have never smoked a day in my life. But there are some tricks with cigarettes that are really cool. And so I used to do this thing with a cigarette, and they were like, they got, oddly enough, this is like back in like 96, 97. They got complaint letters that I was corrupting their children by doing a trick with a cigarette in a casino and for adults with half-naked cocktail waitresses everywhere, and gambling and smoking going on everywhere. Because back then there was no non-smoking anywhere. You could smoke anywhere in the hotel. But I was the bad influence on their child. So they were like, hey, you got to take it out of the show. And I'm like, no. Like, well, if you don't take it out of the show, you're not going to get re-upped on your contract. I was like, well, then don't re-up me. Yeah. And so we parted ways. Hindsight, probably not the best decision because it was a steady gig, and I was like, fuck you, I'd do what I want.
Not necessarily the best hill to die on, per se.
So but then I had to go into the hustle, and then we had to like constantly go out and find gigs. But in this town, the great thing about this town is there's, well, especially back then too, lots of conventions. Every week there's a convention here. Right now, not as much, obviously, but back in the day, it was like convention, corporates, constantly, nonstop. And that's all I did, man. For years, all I did was bang out these things. Every week we were gigging them multiple times a week. So we were all good to go. And then I got into the fair market, which is like county and state fairs and all that kind of stuff. And those are really good. I like fairs. I love carnivals and circuses in general, so for me, I can never get enough, the smells of a carnival to me are just like so fun. Right. Like, funnel cake and popcorn and cotton candy. I could never see enough of it. Mm. And so getting out on fairs was super great. And I did that for years and years and years. And then I had a really good agent for a while, and he was booking me constantly for stuff. And then I moved back to New York because my grandmother had gotten ill with cancer, and my family called and they're like, listen, if you're going to see her, this is going to be the time, because she ain't going to be here for much longer. So I was like, okay, stuff had kind of stalled out here for me. So I was like, okay, maybe a change of scenery is a good thing. And so I picked up everything, moved back to New York, stayed there, and started getting work again fairly quickly, doing shows and whatnot. And then after my grandmother died, I stayed around for a little while. My grandfather died, and then I was like, I'm I was coming back, and then I started getting booked more out here again. It was weird. It was like for a few years, like it was nothing. And then all of a sudden it was like, now I'm coming back. I'm flying out a couple of times a month. So I was like, screw it. I'm packing up my stuff, coming back. And that was the last time I moved back. And I've been here ever since. But I was going back and forth for a while. I was back and forth like several times a month.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hectic and stuff. And then I came back here, went back doing fairs and colleges and all that kind of stuff. And my very first TV show that I ever got when I was living here was in 95, was the Jenny Jones show. You remember her?
Oh, yes, I remember her very well. Spent a lot of, anytime I was homesick from school, it was always the Jenny Jones show was what I ended up watching.
Okay. A lot of younger people aren't going to know who the hell she is. She was a really well-known comedian, a really well-known working comedian for quite a number of years. And then she got that's when those garbage junk talk shows became a big thing. Her, Jerry Springer, all of those guys, Donahue, everybody was, Maury Povich, all those guys all started blowing up at that time. And she did all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was watching the show and it said, hey, do you have an unusual talent? And send us a video. So I sent them a video of me doing a human blockhead where you take the nail and you drive it in with the hammer.
Yeah.
And I sent that in and I got the gig, and it was my very first TV show. And I learned a lot on that very first one, so much so that it made me really good to this day when I book TV appearances, because they didn't pay me and I didn't even know that you could ask for money, but they flew me out, put me in a hotel, fed me. I was like, this is great, I'm gonna be on TV. So the name of the show was Unusual Human Talents. We're in the green room and it was like a cattle room. Like everybody was crammed in there. It wasn't very nice. And, but I met this one guy there, and I'd seen him on other shows. It was this very muscular, tall, black guy. And he would do jump roping stunts with like girls on his shoulder and on the sides. And he would jump rope with like 3 girls on him. It was great. He'd do push-ups with his thumbs and stuff. It's fantastic. And I was talking to him and I'm like, oh my God, I've seen you on those other things. And he's like, well, yeah. He's like, did you get your rate? And I'm like, what's that? And he was like a day rate. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, oh, you're not getting paid. I'm like, oh, you're getting paid? He's like, yeah, you always get paid. I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. I'm just happy to be here. So he schooled me for the next 2 hours on what these kinds of shows are like and how you get paid. Mm-hmm. And I was like, So even though I didn't get paid, I got paid, because hanging out with that guy for an entire day was a giant life lesson. I learned a lot. Yeah. And I also learned that they lie to you, that TV producers will lie all day long to you. And the real name of the show was Totally Useless Talents. And so I was on the show with two very well-known performers who were like the guest performers, not like part of what we were doing. Gallagher. Yep. And the amazing Kreskin. Both of those guys really well known. And so the reason I figured out the name of the show is because one of the PAs, the production assistant, had a clipboard, and I saw the name of the show and it said Totally Useless Talent. And I'm like, and I grabbed it, I'm like, hey, is that I thought the name of the show was Unusual Human Talents. And she's like, oh yeah. This is just like, just like the running name that we put on the board. Complete lie. Wow. So and then it came time for me to do my spot, and I'm standing like off stage behind the structure, that's part of the staging and stuff. And then you learn what the backstage looks like, which is terrible. It's just like 2x4s and stuff just nailed together. And then the girl's like all pumping me up. She's like, you ready? I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking ready. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, all right, go. And I'm like, stop fucking pushing me. But yeah, it was a life learning experience but it was a great one for me, to be honest with you. So I took what I learned that day and I parlayed that into many better experiences for me and more profitable for me. So then after that, one of the next big shows I got was on Howard Stern. And I did Howard Stern, and how I got that gig was completely friggin' random, to be honest with you. I was doing a show in New York City in a bar, in this nightclub bar, opening up for this heavy metal band kind of thing. And I saw this guy, because I watched his show all the time, the E show and the NBC show. And I recognized one of the dudes in the bar. I'm like, oh, that's a producer. I've seen him on the show. So I went up to him. I'm like, hey, you're so-and-so. I don't remember his name now, but I'm like, you're so-and-so from the Howard Stern show. He's like, yeah. I was like, you need to have me on your show. And he's like, really? What do you do? And I took a bunch of cocktail straws out of the cups and jammed them into my nose, like 6 or 7 of them. Jammed them all the way in. He's like, oh my God, what else can you do? I was like, well, I can suck popcorn kernels up my nose and shoot them out of my eye sockets. And I can eat light bulbs and I can do this and I can do that. And he's like, what? He's like, do you have any video footage of this? I was like, I do. So he gave me his information, and then I sent it over to him. And like within a week and a half, I got booked to be on the Howard Stern show. So of course, and I was on with, oh God, what's the guy's name? He had that song, He Caught Me Red-Handed Banging on the Bathroom Floor.
Oh God, was it Shaggy?
Shaggy, yeah. That guy. I was on with him. So he was in the green room next to my room. I was on first. I go on. I do the popcorn thing. They freak out. I do the light bulb eating thing. They freak out even more. And I get done and everything. And I'm walking back to the green room, and Shaggy's coming out, and he looks at me. He's like, really, man? I got to follow that shit. He's like, all I do is sing. I was like, dude, you're like a rock star. I'm just some schmo who like does dumb shit. He's like, God damn, man. He's like, now everyone's all worked up. Now I got to go in there and talk about singing. It was just really fun. It was just like a funny moment. So unbeknownst to me, a producer for the Ripley's Believe It or Not TV show in LA was listening that morning. He called the studio, talked to somebody there, and was like, hey, does that guy's act look as good as it sounds? And they're like, yeah, it's great. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And he's like, cool. Like 30 or 40 minutes after I left the studio, my phone rang, and it was Ripley's Believe It or Not producer going, we want to build a whole segment around you. And I'm like, what? And then I got on Ripley's Believe It or Not. So yeah, and it was just weird how that all just like worked out. Like that did this one thing, and this one thing led to this thing, and
yeah.
And since then I've done a bunch of other. I got on the Tonight Show, and I was on when what's his name? Tom Green had his talk show on MTV. I was on that show as well, and I got that off Craigslist, hilariously enough. And I also got the Tonight Show off Craigslist, hilariously enough. Because back in the day, they would fish for people in those rooms on those pages and stuff, and it was just dumb luck. Because I was on every day, man. I'm nonstop work, and I always tell people, man, nothing's going to be given to you. You got to go get it. Everything I got pretty much on my own, like nobody's help.
Yeah.
Except Howard Stern, obviously, he got me the Ripley's thing because they put him in contact, but. And I wound up doing a Swedish television show, a talk show the same way, Craigslist. And they put out looking for this thing. And I thought it was like some goofy thing. And they were like shooting in New York City and da-da-da. And it's a big primetime Swedish TV show. I'm like, I don't know what these people are. But I got booked for the gig. They sent a limo to pick me up. And I'm like, wow, that's neat. So they drove me to the studio. And I was on with, this is the greatest. I was on with Dog the Bounty Hunter, his wife Beth, and Joan Rivers.
Jesus.
That's this is the dumb, like I tell people this stuff. I'm like, you never believe the dumb shit that happens to me.
Yeah.
And I get stuff in the weirdest, dumbest ways just because I'm relentless with trying to find stuff. And I'll look in every avenue that I can get to try to do what I love to do. And sometimes, I mean, trust me, I have failed hundreds of thousands of times compared to the hundreds of times I've succeeded.
Mm-hmm. And
I tell people that you're going to, in this business, if you're not willing to fail and pick yourself up over and over and over and over again, this is not the business for you, because you're going to get told no a whole lot more than you ever get told yes.
Yeah.
You're going to hear no over and over and over again. You're not good enough. You're too tall. You're too short. You're too fat. You're too thin. You're too this. You're too that. Everything. You're going to hear every reason for why you're not good enough. And that's what show business is. So, and then the Tonight Show was really great, and that got me some really nice other like gigs, non-TV related, obviously. But and then one of the last gigs I got was shows I did, TV shows, was a Late Show with James Corden.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really great show for me. He was so nice to work with. I can't say enough nice things about that guy. He was a pleasure to work with. I cannot say the same about the Tonight Show. It was a great honor to be on the Tonight Show. Like when we were getting ready for rehearsal to do blocking and everything, they had to sit in the audience, and Willie Nelson and his sister were like rehearsing their song, and 2 seats over for me was Burt Reynolds. And I'm like, this is my life. This is my life. This is happening right now. And this is fucking great. So super weird, funny, dumb shit happens to me all the time. And sometimes I have to go back and I should write a lot of it down because I forget some of it. But like, so I guess that's, and then I was out on tour with a show called Masters of Illusion. It's a big touring magic show, and they have a show in the CW with the same title, Masters of Illusion. And they had hired me on as a technical advisor and like head of the magic stuff because they knew I also build and create illusions for people. I used to do a lot more. I don't do as much now, but I did a lot, and they had heard about me, and they're like, "Hey, we need somebody that can do this." And I'm like, they're like, "You want to go out on a tour for 3 months?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So then I started touring with them, and I wound up working them for quite a number of years. And then another magician heard about me. His name is Adam Trent, and he worked with a show called The Illusionists, which is a big touring magic show, but he was going out on his own. And the Illusionists were like part producers of it. And he was like, "Hey, I heard about you. Would you come on and run the magic side of all the magic stuff for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So it was a good gig. Like, I mean, it was a decent offer. I also love being on tour. It's super fun. And I worked with that. And then I got booked with the Illusionists. And then we played all over the place. I mean, I've traveled everywhere with them. And then I came back to Las Vegas, and I started working with Zach Bagans from the Ghost Adventure show. Right. And a mutual friend put us together. And then that was like almost 4 years ago. And my first year there, he found out that I was really into researching like stuff revolving around the occult, specifically around like satanic and demonic stuff. And big surprise, the guy that looks like this loves that kind of stuff, right? And so we started talking about stuff, and he's like, "Hey, I got an investigation I'm doing here in Las Vegas, and I'd love to have you come on as like the satanic expert." I'm like, "Great." He's like, "Do you know a lot about symbols and stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know a lot about that stuff." And so he had me on. I've been working with him now for almost going on 4 years, and it's a great relationship. He's a great guy to work with. And another one of those guys, can't say enough good things about him. Solid dude. Like, I see people say a lot of bad shit about him on the internet, and I'm like, you don't know the guy that I know. Right. And I know him on a personal level, and he is a solid guy. And does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and is very generous to a lot of people. And so whatever people want to talk shit about him, they're all stupid because they don't know anything about the dude. Yeah. So and like, his mom is wonderful. His mom runs the gift shop, and it's an awesome place I get to perform 5 days a week doing sideshow stuff, and also talking about paranormal stuff, and talking about oddities and weird shit. All the things I love, I get to do every day of the week. It's great. It's a great gig. And, the awesome thing is like, I have the freedom, like when I have other gigs and I need to leave, it's perfectly fine. So I can go in and out of town whenever I want, and everything is awesome. So, and then that brings us up to the current thing. We're just about a year ago this week. I got a call from a friend of mine named Doug, and we had done a show a couple of years ago, like a couple of one-offs called Late Night Magic. It was just like this mutual friend of Doug's and I, is named Michael Mayfield, close-up magician here in town. I met him when I did a charity event here in Vegas, and he was like, "Hey man, I really love to get like together like a late night magic show for adults, and it's just like crazy magicians and you can do whatever you want, you can tell the dirtiest jokes you want, and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So we scheduled the first one, lined up the cast, everything was cool, and then we're going to do it like once a month. And we started doing it once a month, and it was great. And then we moved venues, and then COVID hit, and then everything stopped.
Right.
Then January of last year, when COVID was still a thing, but stuff had opened back up here in town, I got a call from Doug, and he's like, "Hey man, we're getting the band back together." Basically, he's like, "We got this thing. We have an executive producer, this guy who's producing a bunch of other shows here in town at this one place called Alexis Park Resort, which is an all suites resort hotel thing here in Vegas, right near the Virgin Hotel."
Uh-huh.
And he's like, we want you to be part of the show because we're looking to have a unique, varied, diverse cast. So there's like me, the weirdo freak show magic, dirty foul mouth guy. Yeah.
Right.
And does all the crazy stuff. And that's going to be you, my character. He's like, we have a female hypnotist, mentalist doing her thing. A buddy of mine, Bizarro, who does like weird magic. And it's like corny, weird, like goofy, weird, just bizarre because he's Bizarro. Unusual magic. And then this guy, Mondre, who's a black magician. But he does classic magic like doves and all that kind of stuff and manipulation. And with like the suit, the tail coat and so like you couldn't have 5 more different people on a stage anywhere. Like none of us are remotely like each other. And then they stuck us all together and they were like, "Hey, we're going to do this thing and we're going to make a show and we're going to do it every Friday and Saturday night." I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So we started doing it and they were like, "It'll probably last maybe 3, 4, 5 months." I'm like, "All right, it's cool, whatever. It'd be fun." So we started doing it. And as we we're going, I was like, "Man, I really like to add," I was like, "some magic." Like, cause I wasn't doing really any magic. I was doing mostly just all sideshow stuff, but I love magic and I love doing magic. And I was like, "Man, I really like to add a magic trick in." And they're like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I'd do this trick or make it snow and stuff. It's kind of cool." And he's like, "Okay, cool." So I started working on that. And then with the help of some of the other guys, the performers, I started throwing out ideas to how to make it different than everybody else was doing it. And the routine that I do now is a culmination of all those people helping me. And that's the great thing about this cast is we all interact so well together, even though we're completely different from each other. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to add illusions into the show because I love illusions and I always loved doing bigger magic tricks. And so we were able to add in one thing every once in a while. And then I started adding illusions and stuff. And I was doing it with one of the other female magicians in the show. And we would do it every once in a while. And then we moved rooms and into a little bit more of an intimate room, but it was an actual theater. And it was a lot better for us, I think. Mm-hmm. And so we started doing shows in there and then we kept going and going and going. And a friend of mine who I had known for a couple of years, who lived here in Vegas. I actually met her. She was a tour guide at the museum, and she had an offhanded time one time. She's like, "Man, I really want to get in boxes and get cut in half." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Well, I just happen to own a bunch of boxes, and I could stab you and cut you in half." And she's like, "I'm in." And so then we decided to partner up and everything. And now she works in the show with me doing the illusions, and we're building up a bigger show together to take on to like cruise ships and all that kind of stuff. But it's been great. So now I have somebody who just works with me, and it doesn't have to be one of the other female magicians in the show. So she's been doing the show now with me for a couple of months and stuff, and it's been awesome. So it's like, it's just kind of fun to have somebody that I can do all that stuff with, and she's totally down for like whatever. It's like stick me in whatever, I don't care. I just want to do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's a great girl.
I wanted to talk about the sideshow stuff that you do, because this was my first exposure to you. I saw you at a Monday's Dark, and you, I believe, in that show, I want to say you did sword swallowing. I'm pretty sure you ate and spat fire. You stuck a drill. You stuck a drill up your nose.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure you swallowed a balloon.
Yes, I did all those things.
And that was several years ago. And so it's scarred into my brain that I still remember all these things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the question, and it's one of those questions, I guess, probably the big question, why? and how? Like, how does this come to your brain?
Well, there's a couple of ways to answer that question. I get that asked almost religiously every day at the museum. I'll answer it this way. Why? The main reason is just like I have a passion for this kind of entertainment, and I have since I was 10 years old, which is when I was first exposed to it. When I was 10, I went to a circus with my family. It's called the Clyde Cole Brothers Circus. They had a sideshow there, and I got chosen out of the crowd to pull the sword from a sword swallower. And I was like, that's for me. And I was already doing magic at that point. Like I started doing magic around 8. But this was real, and there was fire eaters and sword swallowers and snake girls. I really like the girl stuff, like put girls in boxes, and like, this is great in little tiny costumes. I was 10. I didn't know why I liked it, but I knew I liked it. and it seemed very alluring. So I was like, I want to, whatever these guys are doing seems like a lot of fun. And so then I started exploring more of that stuff, and I started like teaching myself very poorly how to eat fire when I was like 11, 12 years old. And then, and I put fire eating in my magic show. Like I used to do, and it was a terrible routine because I still have video footage of it somewhere of like early fire eating acts. It was just awful. The torches were so tiny. And like now, the ones I use now are fucking huge and giant fireballs, and it's great. But my early days, not so good. And then when I was around 15, I was like, I want to swallow swords. And then I started asking people when the circus would come to town, I would ask people, how do you do that? And the guy's like, why do you want to learn that? I'm like, because I want to swallow swords because it's cool. And the very first person ever told me, like, he's like, well, you get like a little dagger, and then you just kind of like you sand it so that it's smooth, and then you just keep shoving it in your mouth until you don't choke on it anymore. That was quite literally the very first advice I ever got in my entire life. And that's pretty much what I did. It was not safe. It was not good. I hurt myself so bad, but I finally did it. And nowadays, when people ask me advice on it, there's much better ways and techniques I've learned. And also, I know some of the best sword swallowers in the world. I'm definitely not one of the best sword swallowers in the world. I'm just really fun and entertaining. And then when I was like 17, I had an opportunity during the summertime when not in school to go out on the road with the Clyde Cole Brothers Circus. And it was an East Coast circus, and they started in Florida. They went up and down the coast pretty much. And I went out and I worked on the circus for a few months out of like 3 months. And that was my first jump into that world. And it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Living in a circus and working with circus people and, like riding on elephants and like, it's fucking amazing.
Yeah. That's the dream, isn't it? Like every kid says they're going to run away and join the circus.
I look back at some of my life and I'm like, God damn, I did some cool shit.
Right.
I could die tomorrow. And I've done way more shit than people, well, now I'm old, but back then I did more than people twice my age.
That's just insane. Now you mentioned injuries, and I assume you've been injured.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and this is one of those things that I'm sure you show up at the emergency room and they just go, oh God, like really again?
Yeah. Most of my injuries, a lot of my injuries, sideshow related, were always from fire. I blew up. I burned myself, lit myself on fire a multitude of times. In the learning phases, and then sometimes accidents just happen.
Sure,
especially when you're working outside. I've done a lot of shows outside, and wind is not your friend, and it can turn a good fire blast into a really, really terrible moment in your life very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I've had quite a few of those. I've had my lips burned so bad that they were swollen. I had to lance them and drain the fluid out like every so often. I've burnt off my eyebrows, my eyelashes, the inside of my nose hair completely gone, torched my face. Yeah, bunches of times. I mean, it hasn't happened in a long time now but back in the day, it's like, yeah, there's a learning curve, and it hurt.
I'm kind of amazed that you actually have any facial hair at all, because I know, like, I think I was about 19 years old and I nearly blew my face off with a barbecue, and my eyelashes are still grow in a weird direction from that. So again, I'm kind of like, wow, he's actually got facial hair. So that's pretty impressive. You must be doing something right.
yeah. Well, you learn things over time, and sometimes you learn stuff by accident. And I have learned a lot of things by accident. One time, because my hair is blonde naturally, I have to dye my hair and my beard frequently. And one time I didn't have beard dye in enough, and my mustache was really turning blonde. And the only thing I had was mascara. And I took mascara and I colored in the beard with it because that's all I had. And then I was doing my fire act, and then I got done, and I noticed it didn't singe as bad. And I was like, huh. And it was the mascara that was protecting it because it coated it, I guess, in a way. I mean, it didn't protect it completely because obviously you put enough heat, it's going to melt it no matter what. But it definitely protected. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. So then I started doing stuff where my hair, I had like a blonde beard, and then I would color in part of it black. And so it was like two colors, and like, I experimented a lot with facial hair all through the 90s and early 90s, mid 90s into the 2000s. But my facial hair has changed a multitude of times throughout the year. Yeah. It used to be super intricate and stuff. Now I don't have the patience for that.
Wow. Again, I mean, I remember seeing you at Monday's Dark and seeing what you did and just being horrified and mesmerized and mystified just all at the same time. And I would imagine that's a relatively common reaction.
The great thing about the stuff that I do, and all sideshow people, really, it's the same thing. Like when you look at a car wreck or a train wreck, and you're driving by, you drive down slow. It's like, because you want to see it, but you don't want to see it, but you really kind of do want to see it. It's that morbid fascination with things that are bizarre and weird. And am I supposed to look at this? Am I gonna, it's like the kid and, like putting your hand in the cookie jar, are you going to get caught watching something you're not supposed to because it's taboo, and I guess certain things that I do check those boxes for people, where they're like horrified, but they also kind of like it. Yeah. Like I've gotten some very interesting things said to me throughout the years by people. I remember at the museum, I did my act, and one girl looked at me. She's like, I don't know if I'm disgusted or turned on or both. I don't even know how to feel about that. She's like, I'm oddly attracted to you, but I'm horrified by you. And I'm like, you're welcome.
my work here is done.
I don't know what to say to that. I just looked at her. I was like, I don't even know what to say because no one's ever said that to me before. But it's like, yeah, I mean, people have different reactions to the things I do, and it's kind of neat because you never know what you're going to get, and people have weird phobias, and a lot of the stuff I do plays on those phobias, especially with like the eye hook thing, right? Put the fish hooks in my eyes and swing the paint can. That one tends to mess people up probably the most, because if you've ever gotten a hair in your eye, it's awful. And if you can, and it's weird because people, it's like a sympathetic thing where they're feeling it for you. And they're like, and I see them cringe and and they start making weird faces, and it's super hilarious to me because they don't even know they're doing it half the time. And I just find it incredibly entertaining on my end, but I don't understand what it is that's, like I never looked at this stuff and cringed. I was like, I want to do that, or they're just like, oh my God, why the hell would you do that? Which, getting back to the why thing, there was a great interview by Evel Knievel one time, and he was on a talk show, Tom Snyder, and he was interviewing Evel Knievel, And he was like, why do you do this to yourself? Like, you crash and break all your bones and all this stuff, and you almost die. And why would you do this? And he literally said the greatest thing. And I've never forgotten it. This quote from Evel Knievel, where he was like, there's two kinds of people in the world, gladiators and spectators. Gladiators achieve glory in the arena of life, and spectators watch those people. Which one are you? And Knievel looked at him and he's like, I'm a gladiator. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm a gladiator. Because every time I go to a show, I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I want to be on that stage right now.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be doing that. And he said that too. He was like, I have a hard time going to watch other people because I want to be the one in the arena. And I'm like, I feel that 100% every time. There's nothing more fun for me out of all the things I've done in life. And I've done a lot of nefarious things and being on stage and entertaining people and watching their faces either be horrified, whatever reaction it is. Art is a weird and subjective thing. It's meant to get a reaction out of somebody. It doesn't matter what the reaction is, whether they hate it, love it, or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as you're getting a reaction from somebody, it's art. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what the definition really is. And I find it incredibly fascinating watching people watch me and how they perceive me as a person and like what I'm like in real life, because people have like these weird things of like, oh my God, he does that, so he must be crazy when he's at home. And I'm like, do you think I sit at home with like a power drill going, like, I mean, but people think that. I've had people say, oh, do you eat fire at home? I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, I just sit around going, hey, honey, here, watch this. I mean, it's like, no, I watch Netflix.
John, I just want to thank you for taking the time to jump on the podcast and chat with me, share your story with me and my listeners. It's been excellent getting caught up with you and learning all about you. I really, really do appreciate it. So again, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, man.
If you want to learn more about John Shaw, follow him on Instagram at John Shaw Magic or on Twitter at John Shaw 666. Also, be sure to find and follow him on Facebook. Just search John Shaw. And if you want to see John and the whole crew from Late Night Magic, you can get tickets by visiting ticketkite.com or the special Jeff Does Vegas affiliate link at vegas.com. As usual, you can find all these links in the show notes at jeffdoesvegas.com. And that wraps up another episode of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas, or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. The Jeff Does Vegas podcast is a Walker New Media production.